There comes a moment in every life when the mask begins to crack. You feel it deep down, a restlessness that no title, no applause, and no possession can satisfy. You may be celebrated by others, and yet feel like a stranger in your own skin. Have you ever asked yourself, who am I really? Have you ever wondered why, despite your efforts to be what others expect, you still feel empty? That's not failure. That's the call of your true self knocking. And today, we're going to answer that call. Because when you finally discover who God created you to be, the world begins to change, not just around you, but within you. Stay with me until the end of this message, because your life is not random. You're about to understand what it means to walk into your divine identity, to become fully and fearlessly you. There's something astonishing about realizing that you exist at all. Think about that for a moment. Out of all the infinite possibilities, out of all the combinations of DNA, personalities, histories, and timelines, you were chosen to be here. There's a sacred mystery in that reality. And yet, for most people, life becomes a long, slow process of forgetting who they are. We trade authenticity for approval. We wear masks crafted by the expectations of culture, family, failure, and even trauma. We strive to become what others want, and in doing so, we drift further away from who we were meant to be. But what if the struggle you feel deep within is not weakness? What if it's your soul trying to remember its divine design? You were not created at random. That's not a motivational statement. It's a spiritual truth. You were crafted with purpose, intention, and meaning. The very core of your being carries the fingerprints of God. And it's not just some vague spiritual sentiment, it's precise. Think of how carefully the cells in your body function, how your mind processes ideas, how your heart aches for something eternal. You are not a cosmic accident. You're not a glitch in the system. You're a living, breathing manifestation of a divine idea. And that idea, your life, has an assignment. There is something only you can do, something only you can offer to this world. But you'll never know what that is until you stop pretending to be someone you're not. And here's the difficulty. It takes tremendous courage to stop pretending, because your false self gets rewarded. It gets applauded. It gets accepted. It fits in. The world loves when you conform, when you shrink to fit its mold. But what the world applauds is often not what heaven affirms. There's a sacred discontent that rises when you live in contradiction to your purpose. You may have money, influence, comfort, but if you're not aligned with your purpose, it will all feel hollow, because the soul doesn't care about what impresses others. The soul longs to fulfill the reason it exists. And purpose is not something you create, it's something you discover. It's encoded in your design. You are here on purpose. And for a purpose. The tragedy is not that people fail to succeed, it's that they succeed at things that don't matter. That's why knowing who you are is the beginning of transformation. It's not about chasing dreams blindly. It's about becoming aligned with the truth of your identity on Identity. Authored by God. But how do you discover who you really are in a world constantly telling you who you should be? That's the next struggle's a crisis of identity. In this world, identity is often assigned by external forces. You're labeled by your job, your gender, your status, your appearance, your race, your success, your failure, even your past sins. Society doesn't ask, who are you? It asks, what do you do? Or worse, what have you done? And when you buy into that framework, you begin to build your self-worth on things that are fundamentally unstable. Jobs change. People betray. Looks fade. Success is fleeting. What then? Who are you when all that's stripped away? What remains when you lose what you thought defined you? The answer is simple but profound. You are who God says you are. And God never called you by your shame. He never called you by your failure. He never defined you by your lowest moment. You may have been rejected, abandoned, abused, overlooked, but none of that disqualifies your identity. In fact, it's often the broken places that reveal your truest calling. It's through the struggle that your true self begins to emerge into the polished version, not the public image, but the authentic, raw, God-shaped version of you, the you that knows pain but still chooses love, the you that's walked through fire but hasn't burned out, the you that cries at night but still gets up and keeps going. That version of you that's real, that's sacred, that's divine. Now, you might ask, why is it so hard to believe that? Because somewhere along the way, someone gave you a name that didn't belong to you. Maybe it was failure. Maybe it was ugly, dumb, worthless, too much, or not enough. Maybe it was abuse. Maybe it was silence. Whatever it wasn't from God. But if you hear a lie often enough, you begin to live like it's the truth. That's the danger of false identity. You start shaping your behavior around the names you've been given, and in doing so, you bury the truth of who you are. And the more you perform, the more you drift from your soul. It's a slow death, a kind of spiritual amnesia. And before you know it, you're living someone else's life. But deep within, something rebels. Something fights back. That something is your soul reminding you, this isn't who you really are. And that's why God steps in. Not to give you a new identity, but to restore the one you were always meant to carry. He calls you by name, not by label, not by performance, by name. When God called Moses, he didn't address him as a murderer. He called him by name. When he found Gideon, he didn't call him a coward, he called him mighty warrior. When Jesus met Peter, he didn't focus on his impulsiveness, he called out his destiny. And that's what God does with you. He sees past your wounds, past your shame, past your masks. He sees your potential, and he calls it forth. But to walk in that calling, you must be willing to shed the names that were never yours to begin with. Letting go of false labels is one of the most painful, but necessary, steps in becoming your true self. Because those labels become identities, and identities shape choices, and choices shape destinies. If you believe you're worthless, you'll settle for toxic relationships. If you believe you're too broken, you'll never chase your calling. If you believe you're not smart enough, you'll stay silent even when you have something powerful to say. Lies shape your limits. That's why truth is so powerful, breaks the chains. And the truth is, you are fearfully and wonderfully made. You are chosen. You are redeemed. You are loved not for what you do, but for who you are. But make no mistake, shedding false identities comes at a cost. It's not just a psychological shift, it's a spiritual battle. Because when you stop performing, people around you may feel uncomfortable. When you choose authenticity over acceptance, you may lose some applause. When you step into your God-given identity, you threaten systems that benefit from your silence. But that's the price of freedom. That's the cost of becoming who you were meant to be. And in that process, God doesn't just give you new clarity, he gives you new strength. Because identity fuels purpose. When you know who you are, begin to understand why you're here. And once you understand that, you become unstoppable, not because life gets easier, but because you get anchored in truth. So ask yourself, whose voice have you been listening to? What labels have you accepted without questioning their source? What lies have shaped your story? It's time to confront them. It's time to bring them into the light. Because you can't become your true self while clinging to a false narrative. You can't fulfill a divine calling while carrying names born of pain, fear, or rejection. It's time to return to the truth. Not just intellectually, but spiritually. It's time to let God rewrite the script of your life. And this isn't about self-help or positive thinking. It's about soul recovery. You're not here to live a shallow, performative existence. You're here to live fully, freely, and faithfully. But it starts with embracing the truth of who you are. Not who the world says. Not who your wounds say. Who God says. And the beautiful, terrifying thing about that is that it will require you to change, to let go, to surrender. But in that surrender, you will find peace. Not the peace that comes from having no problems, but the peace that comes from finally being you. Fully, honestly, boldly, without apology. That's not arrogance, obedience. You were born with divine potential. And now is the time to rise into it. But you cannot rise while wearing chains. And one of the heaviest chains you carry is the false name you've accepted. It's time to break it. To look in the mirror and refuse to see yourself through the lens of your past. To hear your own voice again. To let your true self emerge, not the curated version, not the filtered persona, but the real you. The one God saw before the foundation of the world. The one he loved before you could earn it. The one he died for before you could understand it. That's who you are. And becoming that person is not a destination. It's a lifelong journey, a daily decision, a sacred process. And it begins the moment you say, I will no longer answer to any name but the one God gave me. One of the greatest paradoxes of self-discovery is that in order to become who you are, you must be willing to walk a path that often leads you away from who you were told to be. There's a hidden cost to authenticity, and many people underestimate it. They believe, perhaps naively, that once they discover their true identity, once they understand their God-given purpose, things will suddenly become easier, clearer, more embraced by those around them. But the opposite is often true. Once you choose to become your true self, you begin to threaten the systems that were built around your compliance. You challenge the roles that others expected you to play. And so you must be willing to stand alone, not because you desire isolation, but because the crowd cannot always walk with you where God is leading you. This isn't about rebellion for rebellion's sake. It's about integrity. It's about alignment. It's about choosing to live in accordance with the truth you now know, even when it costs you the comfort of belonging. And that's one of the most terrifying moments in a person's life, the realization that, in order to live with inner peace, they may have to live with outer rejection. But what's the alternative? To shrink your soul just to fit into a room that was never meant to contain you. To betray yourself in exchange for the counterfeit reward of temporary approval. That is a slow kind of death, a spiritual erosion. That wears down the essence of who you are, until you no longer recognize the person staring back at you in the mirror. Standing alone is not a failure. It is often a sign of maturity. It's the evidence that you've stopped asking, "What will they think of me?" and started asking, "What does God require of me?" That shift in focus is where courage is born. And you will need courage. Because people will misunderstand you. They'll question your motives. They'll accuse you of arrogance, of changing, of thinking you're better than them. But the truth is, transformation always threatens the insecure. When you rise, others will feel exposed not because you judge them, but because your existence begins to challenge their excuses. And if you're not ready for that, you'll be tempted to hide your light, just to keep others comfortable. But what good is a light if it stays hidden? What good is your calling if you bury it in fear? So you must be prepared to walk alone for a while. Not forever, but long enough to develop the strength of character that doesn't rely on applause. To stay motivated, long enough to learn the voice of God so clearly that when others speak doubt, you can still stand firm. Long enough to build a life that is stable not because it's easy, but because it's anchored in something eternal. That kind of independence is not isolation, it's sanctification. It's the refinement of your soul until it becomes fireproof, until it no longer bends to pressure or breaks under criticism. And here's the irony. When you do that, when you walk alone with God long enough, you eventually find that you're not alone at all. You begin to attract others who are also committed to living authentically, who are also on the path of truth. But that fellowship only comes after the fire. This is why it's not enough to simply believe the truth about who you are. You must be transformed by it. And that transformation doesn't begin on the surface. It begins deep within the heart. Real change, lasting, powerful, soul-level change can never be manufactured through sheer willpower or behavior modification. You can force yourself to act differently for a season. You can discipline your habits, adjust your language, manage your temper. But unless the heart changes, you're just painting over rust. Eventually, the decay shows through. That's why God doesn't just ask for your habits, He asks for your heart. Because the heart is the engine of your identity. Whatever you believe, they will flow into every other area of your life. So many people try to fix their lives by changing their environment. They move to a new city. They start a new relationship. They change their job. And for a while, it feels like progress. But eventually, the same patterns reappear. Because wherever you go, your heart goes with you. And if your heart hasn't changed, nothing else truly has. Transformation begins when you stop asking, "What do I need to fix out there?" and start asking, "What do I need to confront in here?" That's when growth begins. Not in denial, not in distraction, in truth, brutal, honest, holy truth. And here's something that needs to be understood. With precision, transformation is not a singular moment. It's not one altar call, one breakthrough, one emotional high. It's a process, a journey, a continual refinement. You may have a moment of revelation, but living that revelation requires daily effort. And in that daily process, you will face resistance not only from others, but from within. Your old habits will fight for survival. Your former self will plead to be resurrected. And there will be days when you're tempted to go back, not because the past was better, but because it was familiar. But growth always demands that you leave something behind. You cannot carry your future if your hands are full of your past. So how does one allow the heart to be transformed? It begins with surrender. And surrender is not passivity, it's active trust. It is the choice to stop building your life on your own understanding and to begin building it on divine wisdom. That means letting the word of God speak louder than your fears. It means praying when you'd rather worry, forgiving when you'd rather retaliate, showing up when you'd rather quit. It means replacing the lies you've believed for years with truths that feel uncomfortable at first. But over time, those truths become the new foundation of your life. And you begin to see something miraculous. You begin to live with integrity. What you believe, what you say, and what you do become aligned. That alignment is peace. That's when your life begins to reflect the beauty and order of the one who created you. And that leads to the final movement in this process: action. Because identity is not just something you discover, it's something you live. It's not enough to know you're called, you must respond to that call. It's not enough to know who you must be that person. Even when it's inconvenient, even when it's unpopular, even when it costs you. That's where faith meets courage. Because God didn't call you just to know the truth. He called you to embody it, to live it out in your relationships, your work, your choices, your leadership, your creativity. And the world doesn't just need more people with convictions. It needs people with the courage to act on those convictions. This is where so many people falter. They gain clarity. They find their voice. They feel their potential awakening, but then they freeze. They wait for perfect conditions. They wait for everyone to approve. They wait to feel completely ready. But here's the truth. You will never feel completely ready. Faith doesn't wait for certainty. It moves forward in obedience, even when the outcome is unclear. The call of God doesn't come with a safety net. It comes with a promise. I will be with you. And if that's not enough, nothing ever will be. You must be willing to act, to step out, to risk, because faith without action is dead. It's a concept, not a conviction. And understand this: your calling is not just about you. It's about who you're called to serve. There are people on the other side of your obedience. People who need your story, your wisdom, your healing, your leadership. But they will never receive it if you keep hiding. You weren't given identity so you could admire it. You were given identity so you could activate it, so you could walk into rooms with confidence. Not because you're perfect, but because you're walking in alignment with the truth of who you are. And when you live like that, you become a signpost for others. You become proof that it's possible to be real, to be holy, to be free. So what does it look like to live out your calling boldly? It looks like consistency in the face of chaos. It looks like compassion in the midst of conflict. It looks like speaking up when silence would be easier. It looks like doing the right thing when no one is watching. It looks like showing up again and again, even when the results are slow, even when no one is clapping, even when you feel tired. Because you're not living for applause anymore. You're living for purpose. And that purpose is bigger than you. It's eternal. It's generational. It's sacred. And the beauty is this: as you begin to live your identity boldly, you'll find that the fear which once controlled you begins to fade. Not because you no longer face opposition, but because you're no longer enslaved by the opinions of others. You've tasted freedom. And once you've tasted it, you can't go back. You may stumble. You may doubt. But you keep moving forward because you know who you are and who you belong to. And that knowledge, when it is rooted deep in the soul, creates a kind of strength that cannot be shaken. Not by failure, not by rejection, not by pain. Because it is not borrowed strength, it is born of truth. And truth, once embraced, sets you free.